Coming up today, Korea remembers the 304 people who lost their lives so tragically on this April 16th, the first anniversary of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. President Park Geun-hye embarks on a four-nation tour of South America as Korea looks to strengthen and broaden its political and economic ties with the region. Plus, Korea vows to stick to its stern position on Japan's historical issues when the two sides sit down with the US in Washington on Thursday. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 16th of April. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. 1 year has passed since the sinking of the Sewol-ho ferry off Korea's southwestern coast killed more than 300 people and plunged the nation into a state of shock and sorrow. Our Gwon-soa is at Pengmokhang Harbour on Jindo Island, the closest point to that sunken ship. Soa, the place must be bringing back an awful lot of painful memories for the affected families.
Yes, Mark, this is where hundreds of families waited for news of their loved ones a year ago. They camped out at Jindo Auditorium and traveled to the port every day, anxiously waiting for the bodies of their family members to be recovered and brought to shore. And now this harbor has turned into a place to remember the victims, most of them high school students on their way to Jindo Island for a school trip. On this first anniversary, people from all over the country are visiting the harbor. It's covered in ribbons and banners in yellow and pictures of the 9 people still missing. And so
there was a memorial ceremony held to pay tribute to the victims as well.
That's right, Mark. Hundreds of residents from Jindo County and government officials have gathered at the harbor. There was also an official event with cultural performances, speeches, a video reflecting back on the tragedy, and a student from Jindo read out a letter to the victims. Yellow balloons have been sent into the sky as the names of the victims were shown on a big screen. The Minister of Oceans and Fisheries, Yoo Gi-soon, expressed his sorrow and said the government will not let a tragedy like this happen again. He added that the government would listen to the bereaved families and the public's voices in regards to unsolved issues regarding the accident. Families of the victims were expected to be on the stage too, but those appearances were canceled. Religious events will be following in the afternoon, and there is an altar installed where people can pay their respects throughout the day. Now, that's all I have for now. This has been Gwon-soa reporting live from Pengmokhang Harbour, Jindo.
And now to Ansan on the outskirts of Seoul, the city hit hardest by the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. 325 second-year students and 15 teachers from Danwon High School boarded the ferry for a school trip, and 250 students and 11 teachers died when the ship capsized. Our Shin Se-min is standing by in Ansan. Se-min, how are people coping today?
Hi, Mark. Yes, people here in Ansan, it's a sad day for many. Just a couple minutes ago, it started pouring rain, and I'm standing in front of Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall, which was set up 1 year ago to pay tribute for the lost lives from the sunken ferry, and most of them were high school students. Earlier this morning, many people visited to pay tribute to those at the altar and including a group of students from Tainan High School who came to pay respects at the altar covered in portraits of their friends who died in the accident. The chairman of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party, Moon Jae-in, has been here to offer condolences, but a couple hours ago, Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu was prevented from entering by members of the bereaved families who objected at his presence.
I see. So the city is understandably in a somber mood. Are there any other memorial events scheduled?
right, Mark. Originally, there was a scheduled memorial event scheduled to take place here in Ansan at around 2 p.m. local time, but that plan got canceled by many bereaved families and the civilian committee. The task force committee have announced that they would not go ahead with their original plan because they are dissatisfied with the government's delayed decision on salvaging the ship and uncovering the truth behind the tragedy. A few politicians had planned to attend that mass, including ruling Saenuri Party Chair Kim Moo-sung and the floor leader Yoo Seung-min. There is also a tentative plan to hold a march from the Memorial Hall to Tainan High School about 5 kilometers apart, but that still hasn't been confirmed. And later tonight, Tainan High School will host a private ceremony for the school community and invited guests only. Memorial services are also being held at 126 locations across the country where citizens are gathering to mourn together. And I will bring you more updates throughout the day. And this has been Shin Chae-min reporting live at Ansan Olympic Memorial Hall.
President Park Geun-hye embarks on a four-nation tour of South America this afternoon. Officials say she hopes to use her summit diplomacy to secure more opportunities for Korea in the region. Our presidential office correspondent Chae Sun reports.
With a combined GDP of $6 trillion and a population of 600 million, South America, like the Middle East, is considered a region that can offer Korea a new growth engine overseas. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's 4 major Pacific Rim partners in South America, President Park Geun-hye will look to strengthen the partnerships beyond the economy to healthcare, education, defense, and ICT. In Colombia, President Park will discuss ways to deepen the two sides' strategic cooperative partnership, as well as help spur the implementation of the bilateral free trade deal, now awaiting the Colombian Constitutional Court's approval. On a state visit to Peru, President Park will attend a defense industry-related event. This as Korea seeks to export its light combat aircraft, the FA-50, to Peru, which is in the process of modernizing its defense capabilities. The third leg of President Park's tour will be Chile, Korea's first free trading partner. Based on the bilateral trade pact and comprehensive cooperative partnership, the two countries are expected to talk about further enhancing cooperation towards co-prosperity across the Pacific. On their final stop in Brazil, President Park plans to secure more business opportunities for Korean firms in the world's 7th largest economy. Korean business leaders will also have the chance to network with their South American counterparts, and there will be cultural events to promote Korean pop culture. Aside from her economic diplomacy drive, President Park plans to meet Korean residents who first settled on the continent during the 1960s and 70s as flower farmers, fishermen, and taekwondo instructors. Touting their achievements, she will ask that they bridge ties between Korea and the region. Chae Sun, Arirang News.
Korea's National Assembly began the final day of its 4-day government questioning session by paying a moment of silent tribute to the victims of last year's Sewol-ho ferry disaster. This session is largely focused on follow-up steps over the accident and the government's national emergency preparedness. Lawmakers are grilling government officials on whether master plans and response capabilities have been better systemized since the tragedy. A recent bribery scandal that allegedly involves high-profile politicians, including Prime Minister Lee Wang-gu, is another issue that keeps popping up. Meanwhile, the National Assembly adopted a resolution on Thursday morning calling for the sunken ferry to be salvaged. Korea, the United States and Japan are set to hold their first ever trilateral vice ministers meeting in Washington. The talks are part of U.S. efforts to ease tensions between its two strongest Asian allies, and the historical dispute between Korea and Japan is likely to dominate the discussions. Our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Arriving in Washington, Korean Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yong said Seoul will stick to its stern position on historical issues with Tokyo. Cho is set to hold the first ever trilateral vice ministers meeting with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken and Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Akitaka Saiki on Thursday local time. Historical tensions between Korea and Japan are expected to top the agenda. Their bilateral relations have been badly frayed for years, mainly as Japan denies its wartime atrocities like its sexual enslavement of Korean women in the early to mid-1900s. The Korean diplomat said Seoul is making diplomatic efforts to urge Tokyo to accept a correct perception of history. At the same time, it's pushing to work together on other matters.
We are promoting cooperation with Japan on issues related to both our national interests, such as the North Korean nuclear issue.
The upcoming trilateral meeting was proposed by Blinken when he visited Seoul in February. Washington has been trying to get its two closest Asian allies to make up as it seeks stronger three-way security cooperation to counter the threats posed by North Korea. But it remains to be seen whether U.S. efforts to thaw the frosty relations will be enough for Japan to rethink its distorted sense of history. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea continues to push for the deployment of Washington's missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to the Korean peninsula. Seoul is weighing opposition from neighboring countries and maintains that no official talks on THAAD have taken place. Na Hyung-kyung reports.
THAAD would give Korea and the U.S. a high-tier defense system and enhance the capability of Patriot anti-missile batteries currently on the Korean peninsula. That's what General Curtis Scaparrotti, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea, told House lawmakers in the U.S. during a committee hearing on Wednesday, Washington time. Despite strong opposition from Korea's neighboring countries, China and Russia, Scaparrotti has been adamant about the need to bring in the THAAD battery since June last year. At Wednesday's hearing, he said although Pyongyang has not tested the nuclear-tipped ballistic missile it claims to have, it is his job to assume that the regime has one and he must act on that basis. U.S. Under-Secretary of Defense for Policy Christine Wormuth echoed his thoughts and told the committee that America needs to be prudent and plan for the worst-case scenario in terms of North Korea's weapons of mass destruction capabilities. She added that potential threat factored into Washington's decision to increase its U.S. ground-based interceptors from 30 to 44 by the year 2017. The hearing follows a meeting of the Korean and American defense chiefs in Seoul last week, where they said there was no official discussion of THAAD. Until official meetings take place, the deployment remains in the realm of possibility. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Russia says it fully expects to see North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at its lavish ceremony next month, marking the 70th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. State-run Russian media outlet TASS reports that the country's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, imparted on visiting North Korean defense minister Hyun Young-chul that Moscow is keen to strengthen its ties with Pyongyang at the highest level meetings. The North Korean official is currently in Moscow for an international security conference. The Kremlin has already said that Kim Jong-un will travel to the Russian capital for the May 9th event, but Pyongyang has yet to issue a public statement on the matter. If Kim travels to Moscow, it will be his first overseas trip since taking power in 2011. There's speculation North Korea supplied several shipments of missile components to Iran, while the Middle Eastern country was locked in nuclear talks with the US and other world powers. Citing intelligence officials, the conservative American media website, the Washington Free Beacon, says more than 2 shipments have been monitored by US intelligence agencies since September last year, which appear to violate UN sanctions on both countries. The report says the arms shipments included a large diameter engines that could be used for a future long-range missile system. It also makes the bold claim that the Obama administration was briefed on the transfers but kept it secret from the UN over fears it could rupture the nuclear negotiations. Bloomberg has released its annual global market value rankings, and the only 3 Korean companies actually made the top 500. That's a decline from a year ago when 6 companies made the cut. Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor and SK Hynix stayed on the list, while Hyundai Mobis, POSCO and KEPCO slipped out of the rankings. However, Samsung Electronics did drop 6 spots to 28th, even though its total market value edged up to $196 billion. Analysts explained that Korea's export-orientated companies are struggling to minimize the impact of the weak Japanese yen. And while American businesses still dominate the list, Chinese firms gained ground. They more than doubled their spots from 22 to 46. Apple retained the top spot with a market value of $735 billion. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thanks as always for watching, and we do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow.